Hello, everyone. I'm Kip Odell. I'm the programming manager at Kent District Library. This is one of our streaming programs, and we are very happy to be working with our partners, Home Repair Services and Legal Aid of Western Michigan. Tonight's program is the 10 home ownership tips for low and modest income people and families. And I'm going to bring Steve Grum into the broadcast. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Kip. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, man. Thanks. All right, everybody. I am Steve Grum. As Kip said, I work with Legal Aid of Western Michigan, and we are thrilled to partner with the Kent District Library, with Home Repair Services, and with the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan on this program. Here's what we're going to do over the next about maybe 35, 40 minutes. Just like the program title says, we're going to go one by one through 10 tips to help people who are either planning to buy a home or who currently own a home. Topics we'll cover will include home financing, home repair services, property tax issues, and some estate planning so you would know how to leave your property to your heirs. So as we move along, I'm going to give you my quick lawyer disclaimer language, and then I'm going to introduce and turn things over to our presenters. Okay, so here's the lawyer fine print. While we're super excited to offer general tips today, this is not legal advice. We can only offer legal advice in one-on-one private personal conversations, and this ain't it. So that's it. That's the end of my lawyer fine print. And with now, I'm going to turn things over to John and Elisa after I introduce them. All right. So I am thrilled that Elisa Flores, who's a housing counselor and educator at Home Repair Services of Kent County, is with us today. Hey, Elisa.
Hello.
And also my colleague, John Smith. John's the Director of Strategic Litigation at Legal Aid of Western Michigan. And both Elisa and John are based in Grand Rapids here with me. Hey, Elisa. Hey, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. All right, Elisa, without any further ado, why don't we move right along to tip number 1 and get into personal credit issues.
All right, sounds great. So the first tip is personal credit matters. And this is, super broad, but I will go into detail about a couple things. First of all, a couple things to remember is that cleaning up your credit score should be your work, not anybody else's. Nobody can, clean up your score for you or your credit report. And you also shouldn't pay someone to do that for you. This is a lot of work for you, but you can do it. You can also get a consumer report one time a year for free for each of the credit bureaus. That means that you can get it at any point. You can do it, the 3 credit reports at one, or the 3 credit bureaus at one, or you can space them out. If you're trying to monitor anything on your report, you can space them out, one in February, one in June, one in November, or however you want to do it for the 3 credit bureaus. You can, or you should always object to inaccurate and old information. Negative accounts generally stay on your report for 7 years. Sometimes they don't fall off, and that just means that it got sold to someone else. So just, be mindful of that. And then make sure that you know what process you have in order to clean anything up. So it's a lot of research that you have to do, but it's something that you can do on your own time, and you can do it yourself. And then a couple things to maintain good credit. If you already have good credit, just keep paying everything on time. Make sure that all the payments are in on time or before the due date. This is really important for anything, because 35% of your credit score comes from how you pay your monthly payments, or how you make them if you make them on time or not. Another thing to remember is to keep your balances low. This is especially important for your credit cards. So your credit cards, if you have a credit card that is that your limit is 1,000, you should only use 50% of that, so 500 at a time, or if you want to every month get it to the 500. Don't use more than that, or try not to. And then pay it down to 290 or less every month. So just to make sure that, because 30% of your score comes from your balances on your credit cards, and also on your other loans. And then maintain your old accounts in good standing. This is important because 15% of your score comes from keeping your balances, not keeping your balances, maintaining your old accounts in good standing. That means that the credit card that you got when you were 18 is helping you more than the credit card that you just got last month at the one store over there. So just keep in mind that don't close old accounts unless you have to, because those accounts can really help you. And this goes with student loans as well. Keep your student loans updated at all times, because these can really harm you because they're terrible. But just make sure that you keep paying them on time all the time. And then to build credit, I'll move on in a second, but to build new credit, get a secured credit card. The way that work is you basically bring, let's say, $500 to the bank, and that becomes your limit. So you borrow from your own money and you pay it down, as soon as you can. You can also get a credit builder loan, and the way they work is they take out a fake loan in your name. I say fake because they don't give you the money, but what they do is the bank opens a savings account for you. You deposit every month as if you were making a payment, and this they report to the credit bureaus. So this also helps you with that, making payments on time and everything. So this is a good way to start. You can also make extra payments on any loan whenever you can, and this is really helpful, because that way your balances keep going down. So that's it for tip number 1. So let's move to John for tip number 2.
Caught myself though. I'm on mute. There we go. So tip number 2 is something to be aware of seller financing. And typically this comes about because, as we were talking about cleaning up your credit, when it comes to buying a home, that's a type of loan that there are real hard lines below which, if your credit score is below a certain amount, or if you've done a bankruptcy recently, you may not be able to get financing through a regular bank. And so sometimes some of my clients decide that to take a shortcut, and in order to get themselves into a home, to use some form of seller financing. And it's really not a good idea. I just strongly discourage that if you're considering it. And the basic reason why is this. There are a lot of problems with mortgage companies. I guess we all know that if anybody's lived through the early 2000s. But mortgage companies are regulated and banks are regulated. And so when they give those loans, there are interest rates that they basically are required to provide you. There may be some differences in interest rates, but they're fairly regulated. Additionally, those mortgage companies want to protect their own interest. So that includes, making sure that you're credit worthy, and that's sometimes the problem. But it also means that they want to make sure that the property you're buying, they have as much interest in you as making sure that the property you're buying is a good deal. So they'll require you to pay for, an appraisal and make sure that it's worth roughly what you think it's worth. And they usually encourage or require some form of inspection to make sure that there are no hidden flaws in the property. When you buy real estate, when it's seller financed, and the old school seller financing is a land contract, but we also see things like lease with options to purchase. The seller is also basically providing the financing. They are the ones who are lending you the money, and they don't care if you pay too much for the house, and they don't care if you pay too much interest, and they don't care if you have all the rights that you would normally have with a mortgage should you default. With a mortgage company, there's a foreclosure process that they have to go through. With certain types of seller financing, that gets cut way down. So you lose a lot of rights. So many that at some point it becomes just like a lease, where you get none of the benefits of ownership, but you take on all of the obligations of ownership, like maintaining the home. So for those reasons, we just strongly discourage any form of seller financing. So now we're going to move back to Elisa for tip number 3.
Sorry about that.
I surprised her.
Yep. I was criticizing John for doing this before, so that's on me. So tip 3 is know the finance mortgage basics or the mortgage finance basics. And usually this is a whole complicated process, but some things that I would recommend to keep in mind when you're starting the process. Talk to a few lenders because every lender will have different programs that you might be interested in, and you won't know about those programs from lender A unless you go to lender B. Like they don't really communicate with each other. Their job is to get your mortgage. They don't have to give you any information about programs that they don't have. Some lenders are good at that, but most of the time they don't have to do it. So talk to a few lenders. And in terms of the credit portion of this, you can talk to as many lenders as you want within the same 30 days. So mark this in your calendar. Always take care of those 30 days because when they pull your credit, every single lender will pull a credit report for you. And if they do it within the same 30 days for you, it will count as if they were, as if it were one pull, as opposed to if you pull it in April and then you go 31 days and then you pull it in June or July, then that basically shows that you are not a good consumer and you're just randomly shopping around. So you have to make sure to do it within the same 30 days. And then with that, make sure that you feel comfortable with the person you're working with. So if you show up to a lender and for some reason they make you uneasy and they're, just trying to sell you on something that you're not really comfortable with, walk out of there. You don't have to give them your information. Thank for your time, but I think I'm going to go with a different lender. It's totally normal. It's totally good for you to look out for your best interest, right? And then always request a copy of the credit report they pull. They don't have to give it to you unless you request it. If you request it, it is their obligation to give it to you. So make sure that you request that. If you're denied a mortgage loan for whatever reason, just request an explanation for it. It doesn't have to be in writing, but it would be good for you to know exactly if it was a credit issue, if it was a savings issue, just request an explanation for that because they have to explain it if you ask. But if you don't ask, they'll just say you're not ready, come back next year, right? But you really need to know what you have to work on. And then avoid getting more credit once you start the process. Don't get into more debt because, and I don't want to go into too much detail with this, but if you add more debt to your ratio of what your debt is compared to your income, if you add more debt, it is harder for you to qualify for a good mortgage payment or a house payment that you were thinking of. Sometimes people get pre-approved or pre-qualified initially, and they say, oh yeah, I'm applying for a house, I'm in the process of buying it, it's great, and then they buy a car before the day of closing, and that means that they have 200 and whatever, I don't know, $250, let's say, for a newer car a month that they can't count on for mortgage now. So just make sure that if you are getting into more debt, that you're doing it before. Also, don't get into too much debt, but that's your decision. But just make sure that once you start the process, that you don't do anything else to harm your possibilities of, actually being able to afford a house payment. And then I believe the next slide is mine as well. So tip 4 is a term that you should know is the escrow account. And I kind of wrote a little blurb of that because I always get confused with all the terms. But when you're closing, when you're purchasing a house, at closing, you bring 1 year of homeowners insurance. This is money that the lender has already told you that you're bringing. It's not surprise. It's something that they've already discussed with you. It might be included in your closing costs, but you bring 1 year of homeowners insurance and a portion of property taxes depending on when you're closing. And this is so that they can pay the 1 year of homeowners insurance upfront, and you don't have to worry about, making payments every month, or that you're not covered by that insurance, right? So you bring a full year ahead of time, they pay it, and then every month a portion of your monthly payment goes into an escrow account that the lender will use to pay out the insurance when it comes due the next year. For the taxes, I say you bring a portion because it really depends on when you're closing. If it's summer taxes, if it's winter taxes, when those are due, and when you're closing, how many days you're having to bring from that escrow. And then taxes are due twice a year. And basically, the escrow account works as a savings account. So you don't have to be keeping in mind about when those things are due. And it's really confusing. You don't have to make 5 checks to 5 different companies. The lender will disperse those to whoever is in charge, right? So they will take your principal, your taxes, insurance, all of that into one payment, so that you only have to worry about writing um, one check basically. And I think that's it for, yeah. And most of the time, this account is not really an option unless you bring a lot of money for the down payment. But generally, the lender will set this up right as you're closing. So we're moving on to tip number 5.
All right, and I'll take over. Tip 5 is simply how to communicate with your servicer. And this confuses people sometimes. Almost any mortgage that you take out, even if you go to your local bank, will be transferred almost immediately to another company. And it's really confusing because it actually gets transferred. The ownership goes to one company, and then they hire another bank to service the loan. And so there's 2 people usually, or 2 companies involved. And then the servicer will change throughout the loan sometimes, maybe even every couple of years, depending on the person. And so that does confuse people quite a bit. There are some regulations that protect you there, and servicers first have to identify themselves, and they have to inform you when there's going to be that transfer. Your current servicer will have to send you a letter informing you of the transfer, like to a new servicer, and that new servicer has the duty to send you an onboarding letter as well, and kind of explaining all of that. When sometimes you do get into disputes with your servicer as you're making payments, because as Elisa said, there's this escrow account that, sometimes people make mistakes and payments don't get made, or payments get applied wrong, and you need to contact your servicer. And your first step can simply be to call them, but you do have a right, if you have a dispute or if you need information from your servicer, to make a request to them. We call it a qualified written request, but it's simply a written request to either get information relating to servicing or dispute something about the servicing. And if you send it to the right place, your servicer has to respond within a certain amount of time. And if you request documentation, provide you those documents. They are allowed to identify a specific address to send those notices to, but that address has to be readily available either on your statements, and it usually is on the back. There's a list of 2 or 3 different addresses for different types of communications, or it's also oftentimes on their website. And when it's on their website, I believe it's publicly available, so that you should be able to find it in the public area, not even when you sign in. But it should be easy to find, and you can send those out. There's no obligation to send it certified mail or to notarize it or anything. Whenever I do it, though, I always at least send it certified mail, not restricted delivery, but just simply so that I can confirm that it was received at that address. It's just good evidence. And so now we're going to move on to the next tip and give you a little bit of a caution flag when it comes to lending. And so tip 6 is simply to be cautious about additional financing. And this is just keep in mind when you buy your home, it is an asset, and it's an asset that you're slowly paying off. And so you're developing, as you pay that off, you're increasing your wealth. And there is a lot of pressure out there for you to take that wealth that you've accumulated and turn it into debt, basically turn it into more debt and buy more things. And there's a lot of people on TV selling you those things. Your banks will be selling you different loan packages because to encourage you to get additional loans. And I just warn you to be cautious about it. There are times when these financings make sense and times that they don't. And so, be careful about entering into these contracts. Probably the one that makes the most sense to consider is what we call a HELOC. It's a home equity line of credit. It's simply a second mortgage that kind of sits on top of the first one. And for a certain sum of money, let's say $10,000 or $20,000 that you have access to, that you can borrow at any time, and you don't pay anything until you borrow the money, and then you can write checks out of the account, and then once you do, then it starts accumulating interest, and you need to pay that down over time. And that is not a bad way of paying for, home repairs or things like that. Today I actually have a hot water heater. People bang around in our basement putting in a hot water heater. So, maybe we'll pay for that out of a HELOC account. So that's probably the one that makes the most sense in my opinion. Another way of refinancing is a cash out refinance. It oftentimes makes a lot of sense for homeowners to, after a few years, shop around for different interest rates, or even to convert a 30-year into a 15-year potentially to pay it down more quickly, or to get a better interest rate. But I just caution everybody about when you do that, there's again availability of credit. You can take out additional money from your home, and so you're increasing your mortgage again. And just be aware that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you are increasing the amount that you owe again. And so if you find yourself in a bad position, obviously you'll have to pay that back. And then the third type that I really strongly caution you against is a reverse mortgage. And these are mortgages that are only available to people who are over a certain age. And for the most part, they are regulated by HUD, but there are some private ones out there, completely private ones out there as well, and what happens is that they loan you a chunk of money now up front. And usually it involves paying off your mortgage and then some more money. And then you never have to pay a dime on that new loan. You do have to stay in the house, and you default on the mortgage by either passing away or moving out of the house for more than a year. Both of those things are considered defaults. And so as long as you stay in the house and keep paying your taxes and insurance, you don't owe any money to the company. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they just have a lot of embedded fees. And because you are getting this money out up front, and so you're not thinking as much about paying anything back, you tend to accept a lot more fees than you otherwise would. So just be very cautious about that, especially if you have any interest in leaving that property to your family when you pass. So I think we're kind of done with some of the I'm sorry. I think we're kind of done with some of the, the purchasing issues, and now we're going to talk a little bit about, what happens when things go bad financially with a mortgage. And so tip 7 involves foreclosure and bankruptcy, and I really just want to give some very brief explanation of this process and your rights. And the big takeaway here is it's not the end of the world, and if you find yourself in a position where you're facing foreclosure, you do have rights. It is a process that you can engage in, and make sure you aren't just ignoring these notices as pressure mounts up. It's a natural thing for people to do, but the best thing you can do is get out in front of it, communicate with your servicer, potentially talk with a lawyer. The foreclosure process is long and slow, and if you act early, you can be reviewed for a loan modification. And then you get plenty of notice before there's what's called a sheriff's sale. And then if a sheriff's sale goes through, you have, it depends, but usually 6 months to remain in the home after that before you'd be forced to move out of the home. You do have important rights that exist before a sheriff's sale, but not after. And one of those rights is the ability to use a bankruptcy petition to force your creditor into an agreement that is a payment arrangement of sorts. And so that is a right that you have that you should understand. And again, if you find yourself in that position, it is time to talk with an attorney, either at Legal Aid of Western Michigan or a private attorney about your rights. So I think that's enough for home finances for right now. I think
On-
we're going to turn
on
it
that-
over to.
On that bright note, John, that was John and Elisa. That was a whole lot of really good information. That was soup to nuts. Everything from considerations before buying, straight through issues when you're a homeowner, and then wrapping up with John's lovely discussion of what to do when things go bad. Not the most fun stuff to talk about, but super, super important. And it happens, and it's not the end of the world if you find yourself on the wrong end of a foreclosure. So there are ways to work through that. Elisa, let's get out of home finance for a little bit and talk about something near and dear to your heart, I know, home repair.
All right, sounds good. This time I remember to unmute myself. So a couple of things that always happen is that, you might find yourself in a situation where you wanted this repair and then your cousin did this repair at your house for you. And it's great when it works, but it's not great when it doesn't, obviously. So just a couple things before I start talking about the specific programs that we have at Home Repair Services. Just be careful who you hire for your repairs. Especially when you're paying someone, you want to make sure that they have a license, that they know what they're doing, obviously, and that they're confident and that they can show you, this is what I've done before. I have, so many years of experience, or I studied this, whatever it is. Just make sure that you hire someone who has a license, that you can kind of bank on that for later on, because if something goes wrong, then you want to make sure that that you're covered and that they're covered as well, right? Another thing is just to make sure you get quotes from different places. So that kind of goes hand in hand with knowing who you're hiring. Just make sure you're getting the right service. And if you are changing the footprint of your home, so let's say that you're adding a room or changing this room into a bathroom. I don't know, people do that kind of stuff, or changing this room into a walk-in closet and like completely shifting the footprint of the home. You have to file permits for that. Usually the right contractor at this point will make a huge difference, because they will file all of those permits for you. Basically, this is how you know that they actually know what they're doing. And you just have to make sure that if it's something like more serious, that you're actually hiring someone who has the capacity to do this. And then some of the services that we have at Home Repair Services, we do have a repair program. It's some basic home repairs. We do have an income limit for that. So, feel free to call us afterward to talk about this. And there's usually a copay for services based on your income. So every single service that we offer, whether it's plumbing or carpentry or any of the other services that we have, there's usually a copay, and that has to come out of pocket unless you're working with a specific program. I don't want to get into all the details of that, but there is an income limit for that. But if you have questions about it, let us know. Just give us a call. We do also have a kitchen remodeling program, and this program is free. You get to work with someone who basically walks you through the process of remodeling your kitchen. And then it's a whole program. It's a really good program for someone who's interested in doing this at a lower cost, and who wants some guidance, right? That is a free guidance. So that's always a good thing. And then the Fix It School workshops, those are usually we basically sit down in a huge room, and we get to learn how to change a light bulb, but not only change a light bulb, you learn how to wire a light bulb, how to, all those basic things, basic plumbing, flooring. You might learn how to do siding or things like that. So it's a really good program to have. Right now we are not open with it because it has to be in person, and it's such a hands-on program that we are not open yet, but we're looking to that for the future. Another program that we have is home maintenance checkups, and this is also a free program. Someone comes to your house and basically walks through the home and says, kind of points things out that might need repairs in the future. So this is just part of that, part of that process. Some other programs that we have at Home Repair Services is our housing counseling services. We do housing counseling for people who are going through a foreclosure. So when John was talking about that, that's exactly it. Like we work with people who are going through a foreclosure, whether it's tax or mortgage foreclosure, and we help them out with the paperwork to, I don't know, do a forbearance or to do a loan modification. Of all those things, we work with that. We do have financial capabilities workshops as well. Those ones we're just doing them online now. But that's a good program if you want to learn more about credit and budgeting and all of those things. Consumer protection actually taught by John usually. Insurance, we talk about a lot of stuff. We also have a Money Matters workshop, and that one is also online. That one is free. The financial capabilities workshop is you get a certificate of completion at the end, so it is $10, not for the certificate, just for the program itself. And then the Money Matters is free. Usually we have both of those every month. Um, and then I do want to mention a couple programs that are around Kent County. So in case that that we're not able to help you with the programs, or that the program that we have is not fit for you, there are other programs. So the City of Grand Rapids has a housing rehabilitation program. City of Wyoming has home rehab loan program, and both of those are loans that the cities have. You have to qualify for them, but they're really good programs if you want to do some remodeling in your home or rehabilitation as well. There's the Kent County Community Action. They do have programs for that. So I'm just telling you the names so that you can look them up afterwards. There's the Neighborhood Impact Program and the Accessibility Modification Program. There's a Neighborhood Strong program with Amplify GR. So there's a ton of programs that that can help you when you're looking into the what programs are around to help you with your modifications of your home. And then I think we're going back to John for how to handle your property taxes.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I just want to touch briefly on some property tax issues and help you understand those. A couple of these may not come up as often, but they're good to know. The first thing is to keep in mind that if you have higher property taxes and if you're not familiar with it, you should look into and confirm that you are getting your principal residence exemption. It's an exemption that should apply. It's 100% exemption if you are living in your own home and it's a one unit place, I guess you'd call it. If you own a duplex or a fourplex, then it gets reduced to 50% or 25%. But we call it a PRE. The PRE is a pretty big reduction in your property taxes while it is your principal residence, and but it doesn't reduce your taxes to zero. So every once in a while, somebody has never gotten their primary residence exemption, and so it is helpful to look and make sure if you've been in your home for quite some time. I think for quite a while, anytime you've purchased a house, the closing agency would help you fill out those forms. And so if you've purchased it in the last 10 years, probably you're getting it, but it's worth looking at. The other time that it comes up that people are not getting a primary residence exemption or a principal residence exemption is if they are living in the home that they own, but the ownership is a little bit odd. If you're buying it on a land contract, if you're the purchaser on a land contract, then you should be getting the principal residence exemption. Similarly, if the home is in the name of a trust, either a trust that was like your trust, you transferred it into a trust that you set up yourself, or if you inherited the home through a trust, in either example, you should get the principal residence exemption as well. So make sure you are getting those things. The nice thing about that exemption is that if you can show that you should have gotten it in the past, they can go back, I believe, 3 years and return the money that you should have gotten or that you overpaid in those prior years. Another property exemption that exists and is little advertised is a poverty exemption. A person who is below federal poverty guidelines can apply to their township or city, depending on the taxing agency, for a poverty exemption. And they're supposed to have a form that you fill out and provide your assets and your income. And it's really supposed to not be discretionary below that poverty threshold. Townships or taxing authorities can provide a better exemption, and that is discretionary. But below that poverty guideline, or below that poverty line set by the federal government, it really shouldn't be discretionary. So your exemption should be granted if you apply for it. However, you do have to apply for that every year, and you can't go backwards. So if this is something that you may qualify and you are a homeowner, I would encourage you to apply for that. The places that I've dealt with accept applications. Well, they accept them all year round, but they review them in February and July. So you may have missed the February round, and but you have plenty of time for the July round. And finally, just be very aware, especially if you own a home and don't have a mortgage with an escrow so that the property taxes are being paid. Be very cautious and make sure you are getting those property taxes paid, because the property taxes, the failure to pay those for a few years can cause a foreclosure. And it is a little bit different than the foreclosure that I described before. There's a process of notifications. They end sometime in the spring of each year, but when they end, you are done. There's no going back. There's no redeeming the property after a property tax foreclosure. You have lost that property. And so be very cautious and make sure that if you are getting those notices, that you take some action. There are a lot of things you can do before the foreclosure that you simply can't do after the foreclosure. So keep that in mind. Property taxes are something that we all can look into and hopefully reduce the amount that we're paying every year. And so with that, we'll move on to our last tip, which is simply estate planning. And this is not an estate planning lecture, but I just want to talk a little bit about kind of estate planning and the home that you own, where those two come together. Keep in mind that if you do own your home and you would like to leave it to somebody, you can use a deed to, even while you're living there, to transfer the property upon your death. There's a few different ways you can do that. You'll often hear people talking about joint tenancies, and that's the simplest way. If you do not transfer let me strike that. If you do transfer the property with a deed, one of the benefits is that it avoids probate entirely. And so your heirs will not have to worry about the difficulties of probate. If you don't transfer your property, your real estate through a deed, then whoever would inherit it would have to go through a probate process to have that property transferred into their name. And that's true whether you have a will or you do not have a will. Additionally, if you don't have a will and you pass away with property, the state doesn't care what you want to do with that property. They only care about who would actually be able to take under state law, receive that property under state law. So in general, it's people you would think of as your heirs, your children, and kind of down to grandchildren, and then up to your parents, and then over to your siblings. And if you don't have living parents or children or grandchildren or siblings, and it goes out several degrees, but ultimately the state will just take the property. And there's no way really outside of planning to leave property to like a friend or a loved one who isn't related to you. So you want to be cautious about that if that's what you really want to have happen. And finally, just keep in mind that if you are planning on leaving property to a relative, or if you're somebody who has received property from a relative who passed away, there are big issues when it comes to the mortgages or the reverse mortgages. In either way, they have to be paid off in the case of a reverse mortgage, or there are ways that you can assume the mortgage if the property has a mortgage attached to it, but that may require probate as well. So those are times to definitely contact an attorney and understand your rights before you do anything. And I'll turn it over to Steve to wrap up.
All righty. Yeah, thank you, John. As we wrap things up and move along to our last slide, I'll just say thanks again to John. Elisa, thank you to you and to Home Repair Services for joining us. Thanks so much to the Kent District Library for hosting us tonight. And we really hope this was helpful for you. And we'll come on back, I think, next month and talk about a new legal topic. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
All right, take care.